The sun hung low over the Matthews Ranch, spilling molten gold across the rolling fields and long, weathered fences that marked the boundaries of Jackson Cole's domain. Dust swirled lazily in the dry wind, carrying the scent of sun-baked earth, hay, and the faint tang of livestock. Jackson wiped sweat from his brow with a dusty sleeve and squinted toward the farmhouse, the rhythmic clatter of hooves and distant lowing of cattle creating the familiar soundtrack of his life. He had been accustomed to solitude, to the quiet discipline of ranch work, the endless chores that kept the land running and his mind occupied. But today, a sharp cry cut through the wind, slicing through the monotony of the afternoon like a blade. "Get inside first. Then, hurry." The voice called, urgent and trembling, yet commanding. Jackson's heart skipped a beat. He pivoted toward the sound, eyes narrowing against the sun, and saw her, Clara Evans, standing at the porch doorway of the main house. Her hair was tousled, strands falling across her forehead and cheeks, her blouse flapping in the gusts of wind. Her arms were outstretched, one hand pointing toward the barn, which now had a thin plume of smoke curling above it. The fire had begun near the hayloft, small but voracious, feeding on dry wood and hay. Sparks drifted lazily on the wind, and Jackson could see the glow of the flames licking the edges of the barn door. He instinctively started toward the house, confusion mingling with urgency. "Inside first, then what?" he muttered under his breath. Clara's eyes locked onto his, unwavering, the edge of command sharp and clear. "Trust me," she said, her voice carrying over the wind and the distant calls of the ranch hands. Her expression was a mixture of fear and determination, a signal that something more lay beneath the immediate danger. Jackson spurred his horse into a controlled gallop, the animal's hooves kicking up clouds of dust as he approached the porch. Clara slipped inside, her movements quick and purposeful, and he followed, ensuring she was safe before turning back toward the barn. Every second felt heavier, more charged, the fire could consume the structure in moments, and the stakes were higher than they had ever been before. The heat from the barn was palpable even from a distance, radiating outward in waves. Jackson's pulse quickened as he dismounted, boots scraping against the dry earth, and charged forward, fists tight, eyes scanning the barn's interior. The flames had begun to climb higher now, licking at the timber supports and sending small embers scattering into the dry grass. His breath came in sharp bursts, lungs burning as adrenaline surged through his veins. He could feel the heat on his face, the crackle of the fire in his ears, and yet he moved with a precision born of experience. Inside, the source of the fire was clear. A lantern had toppled in the hayloft, igniting the dry, brittle hay with alarming speed. Jackson threw handfuls of hay aside, stomping out flames as he moved. Smoke filled the air, thick and choking, clinging to his lungs and stinging his eyes. He coughed, shaking his head, refusing to let the panic take hold. Every movement was deliberate, each step measured, as he wrestled with the fire and the rolling chaos around him. He grabbed the lantern, dumping its contents into the dirt outside, and finally felt the worst of the blaze contained. Exiting the barn, Jackson stood in the doorway, chest heaving, soot streaking his face and hair. The wind carried the acrid smell of smoke across the fields, and the sight of the once threatening flames reduced to smoldering embers sent a wave of relief through him. He was breathing heavily, but he could see Clara standing nearby on the porch, her face flushed with worry and admiration. "You did it," she said softly, her voice almost reverent. "You saved the barn, the ranch, everything." Jackson shook his head, brushing dirt and soot from his hands. "I did what I had to do. You called me inside first. That saved me from getting caught in the worst of it," he said, still catching his breath. He couldn't help but notice the way she studied him, the intensity of her gaze, and the faint tremor in her hands as she stepped closer. Clara's hand brushed his arm lightly, almost hesitant, yet deliberate. "Sometimes," she said, her voice low and intimate, "saving each other isn't just about strength. It's about timing, and trust." Jackson's heart thudded in his chest. He had known Clara for months, respected her, admired her resilience and determination, but this moment, standing there in the fading sunlight, soot and sweat clinging to him, made him realize there was something deeper, something unspoken, weaving itself between them. He swallowed hard, feeling the shift in the air, the electricity of the moment charged by shared danger and narrow survival. She looked up at him, eyes wide, searching, weighing. The fire had threatened more than wood and livestock, it had tested courage, instinct, and resolve. And now, standing on the threshold of safety, she was reaching out, not just in gratitude, but in a subtle declaration that the bond forged in danger could become something lasting. Jackson's gaze softened. I've spent most of my life alone, he admitted quietly, voice rough from exertion and smoke. I never thought I'd feel anything like this, right here, right now. Clara tilted her head, a faint smile playing on her lips. Sometimes, she said, life surprises us. In moments of danger, you discover more than just courage, you discover who matters. And who matters can change everything. The wind stirred again, lifting dust and stray hay, rustling the loose boards of the barn. The sun dipped lower, shadows stretching across the fields. Jackson took a step closer to Clara, the adrenaline fading and leaving a warm, steady pulse in its place. He could feel the weight of the past months, the hard labor, the isolation, the quiet admiration he had always held for her, merge with the thrill and intimacy of the moment. I trust you, he said finally, his voice low but steady. And I think, you trust me too. Clara's lips curved into a gentle smile, the tension in her shoulders easing. I do, she admitted. More than I realized until just now. They stood there together, side by side, the smoldering remnants of the barn behind them, the sun casting the valley in warm, golden light. The ranch, the fields, the fences, they were familiar, constant, and unchanging. But this moment, the fire and the fear, the shared triumph and the silent acknowledgement of something deeper, had shifted everything. Jackson felt it, raw and undeniable, the spark of connection, trust, and something more, waiting to grow. He exhaled slowly, letting the tension leave his shoulders. We survived it, he said, eyes meeting hers. And we'll survive whatever comes next. Together. Clara nodded, her hand lingering near his, a subtle but profound affirmation. Together, she echoed, the word carrying a weight of hope, courage, and promise. The sun sank lower, turning the sky into a tapestry of gold and crimson, and the Matthews Ranch, once a place of solitude and labor, felt alive with possibility. In the aftermath of fire and fear, Jackson realized that he had not only protected his home, he had discovered something far more precious, the beginning of a life shared, a bond forged in adversity, and the quiet stirrings of a love that neither had expected but both had silently longed for. The morning sun rose slowly over the Matthews Ranch, spilling a soft golden light across the fields and casting long shadows over the wooden fences and pastures. Jackson Cole awoke early, as he always did, but today the rhythm of dawn felt different, almost charged with anticipation. The fire of the previous evening still lingered in his mind, the smoke and heat a memory that had left a quiet tremor in his chest. He moved deliberately through the yard, boots crunching on gravel, checking the fences, listening to the lowing of cattle and the distant calls of farmhands. Yet, amid the familiar routine, he couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted, something subtle but undeniable. Clara Evans was already awake, standing near the gate, her silhouette framed by the soft morning light. She held a small bundle in her arms, wrapped carefully in a worn but clean blanket. Her dark hair was tied back loosely, stray strands catching the sun, and her eyes held a mixture of nervous anticipation and determination. Jackson approached slowly, unsure of what to expect, but drawn to her with a gravity he couldn't explain. Jackson, she called softly, her voice carrying in the crisp morning air. I want to show you something. He nodded, curiosity stirring. All right, what is it? Clara led him to the barn, which now stood safe and repaired after the fire, sunlight streaming through the open doors, illuminating the dust motes that danced lazily in the air. The barn smelled faintly of hay and the lingering smoke of last night's blaze, a reminder of how close disaster had come. She set the blanket down on a sturdy workbench and unfolded it carefully. From within, she revealed a collection of items, a small, hand-stitched quilt, its patterns delicate and faded, and a worn cookbook, pages yellowed and frayed from years of use. Jackson raised an eyebrow, surprised. A quilt, and a cookbook. Clara smiled faintly, the corners of her mouth tugging up with warmth. Not just any quilt, and not just any cookbook, she explained. This belonged to my mother. I've kept it all these years, and I thought, maybe it could help us start something. Something new, something shared. She looked at him earnestly, her dark eyes searching his face for a reaction, for understanding. Jackson picked up the quilt, feeling the texture of the worn stitching beneath his calloused fingers. There was something intimate about the way it had been made, a quiet care that spoke louder than words. The cookbook, too, was a treasure, recipes written in her mother's careful hand, notes in the margins about spices and measurements, instructions for pies, breads, and hearty meals that carried the promise of warmth and home. He glanced at Clara, meeting her gaze, and saw the vulnerability beneath her courage. She had been fearless when the fire threatened their lives, commanding him to act, urging him to trust her guidance. And now, here she was, offering a piece of herself, a bridge into her past, and a path toward a shared future. Jackson's voice caught in his throat. I don't know what to say, he admitted, his tone rough from emotion and the remnants of adrenaline from the previous day. I've spent my life alone, surviving, working, never thought someone would choose me. Not like this. Clara reached out, her hand brushing against his, warm and insistent. Then don't say anything, she murmured softly. Just feel it, feel that maybe it's time we stop just surviving and start living. Together. Jackson felt his chest tighten. He had always been a man of action, used to facing challenges with grit and determination, yet now he was confronted with something unfamiliar and daunting. Love, partnership, a life intertwined with another. He had admired Clara's strength, her resilience, her courage, but now he realized the depth of his feelings,